NFL draft in under 2 weeks. We've all heard the same names over and over and over again. Let's go through 12 other names in the first round that we have not been talking much about here on NFL Spotlight today. Let's get started. Welcome in. It is the Friday, April 11 edition of the NFL Spotlight Show. I am your host, Ari Meirov, wrapping up the week, the NFL draft getting closer and closer. On yesterday's episode, we did 5 names who are getting a lot of buzz around the NFL in league circles, names you should be prepared to hear a little bit earlier than you might have expected. On today's episode, let's do something a little bit similar, a little bit different. Let me bring in my good friend, Ben Allen. Keeping on the draft talk, Ben, how are we going to do this here today? Because I think, Ben, we've talked so much about Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter, but there's other people on this draft. So I guess let's talk about those guys.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's kind of what needs to be assessed here today is there's 7 guys. You started to say some of those names there. Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter, Mason Graham, Ashton Genty. These guys get talked about nonstop, and they're not even guaranteed the top 7 picks in the draft. Obviously, Shedeur could go anywhere. Genty could fall beyond the Raiders. Who knows? But there's other guys in this draft that are absolutely going to be making an impact for your favorite team next year in the NFL on all different levels. Maybe not quarterback, but you get it. There's some other guys out there of interest. So let's go through all the different groupings for the most part and just try to give people those other first rounders that are going to be making an impact. So let's go ahead. We're going to skip the quarterbacks. We're going to jump ahead of the running backs. We did a little bit of that yesterday. Let's go right to the pass catchers. Who are some of the pass catchers people need to know so that when round 1 starts, they go, oh, I know that dude.
So, I mentioned this yesterday that the wide receiver class this year, not as deep, not as loaded as previous years. But if you ask, I don't know, let's just take 10 teams in the NFL right now, and you're like, hey, how does your wide receiver board look right now? Don't include Travis Hunter. You might get 10 different answers. So one of the top receivers in this draft, Ted McMillan out of Arizona, we're going to start with him because 6'4", 213 pounds, and he plays big, like massive size, unbelievable catch radius. I've seen a lot of people trying to bring him down. I know there was this video that was posted a couple of weeks ago of him saying he doesn't watch film as if it happened recently. The context was missing there. That happened 2 years ago after his freshman year. That was not something that was like a week ago or 2 weeks ago where it's time to make it go viral to make him drop. This is somebody who is a really, really good player. He has a basketball background, has a volleyball background. He can line up all over the place from the X to the Z to the slot. And as one person told me, he's open when he's covered. Like he'll get the ball when it's in his vicinity. And his production at Arizona was off the chains. He ranks number 1 overall in that school history in receiving yards with 3,423, 26 touchdowns over the last 3 years, over 200 receptions. That video that people were trying to bring him down, nobody really has a good reason as to why we're trying to drop this guy in the draft. For the most part, if we're not including Travis Hunter in this equation, he is number 1 wide receiver in this draft throughout the process, and people are trying to change that for whatever reason. But the comp I've gotten for him, I've heard some Cortland Sutton, have heard some Nico Collins for him, big-bodied guy, plays big, and he's somebody who, if you're looking for that type of a player who could be a nightmare for opposing defenses, especially with a creative offensive mind, Ted McMillan is that guy in this year's draft. The other receiver who has been getting a lot of buzz here as of late is Texas receiver Matthew Golden, and he is somebody who he gets in and out of breaks very easily, probably the best route runner in this draft. I've heard a little bit of that. His body control is unbelievable, really plays with an edge, a really competitive person. But the one thing that I've seen other people mention this, it's also been being said by scouts in the NFL, he ran a blazing 4.29 at the combine, which is faster than anybody expected. But when scouts and executives watch his film and watch his game, they don't see a 4.29 there. They see something closer to, 4.38, 4.40, or somewhere in that range. So that's the one thing about him that people are a little bit confused about. But I guess he does have that 4.29 in him because he did it at the combine. But he is somebody as well who I do think goes in the first round. But again, some people have him as wide receiver 2. Some people have him as wide receiver 5. Like, he's truly all over the board. The other receiver, which He's not really part of this equation, but he's kind of closer to Matthew Golden as well, is the Ohio State wide receiver Emeka Egbuka. The one thing I've heard about him, which is interesting, is that he was in the shadow of Marvin Harrison a couple of years ago, was in the shadow of Jeremiah Smith this past year. And it's like nobody ever talks about him as the guy at Ohio State, but very productive, somebody who I do think is the early second round pick, maybe sneaks into the first round. But again, the receiver class this year, it's all over the map, not as deep as in past years. The tight ends is where it's kind of deep this year. And of course, last year we had Brock Bowers, who slid farther than he should, maybe because he's a tight end and it's a non-premium position, but he just had the greatest tight end rookie year of all time. And at some point in a couple of years now, he's going to become the highest paid tight end in NFL history by a very wide margin because of how good he is. So this year you have two really, really good tight ends, blue chip guys, I would say, with Penn State tight end Tyler Warren. Let's start with him. He was basically the offense for Penn State. I mean, over 100 receptions last year, over 1,200 yards this past season, and he truly played all over the formation, in line, slot, out wide, even as a quarterback whenever they did some wildcat plays there for the Penn State offense. And he's somebody who's also a willing blocker, very athletic. The one thing about him is that maybe the route running is not the most crisp thing in the world, but he's able to get open. And the one thing about him, once you get the ball in his hand, which is why Penn State used him in so many different ways. Once you get the ball in his hands, that is where he is special. He can run away from you. He loves to run through you. He will lower his shoulders. He is somebody where you'll see defenders bouncing off of him. He does not care. Once the ball is in his hands, he goes crazy. He'll be on some angry runs there on Good Morning Football of Kyle Brandt. So that is Tyler Warren, who I think has the potential to be a top 10 pick. I'm looking at the Jets at number 7. I'm looking at the Colts, who are down there at number 14, I believe. So those are a couple of teams here who would make sense for him. The other tight end who also should be going in the first round, and depending on how early Tyler Warren goes, I could see him going immediately after potentially, is Michigan tight end Colston Loveland. I mean, he has some good height and size, 6'5", 248 pounds, really battled through some injuries this past year. And of course, Michigan having mediocre quarterback play after the national championship season a year ago. But he's smooth. He's a fast mover. He's explosive off the line, a great receiver, and somebody who really gets into his routes real quickly. So I think most teams have Tyler Warren number 1 in this class, but Colston Loveland is not far behind him. I expect 2 first-round tight ends in this year's class. So those are the pass catchers here, Ben. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about the protectors up front as well here on the offensive side here next.
Yeah, that's where I wanted to go with things because it's an interesting group. You know, it's obviously one of the most sought after positions every single year. You can never get enough of them. But this class has some interesting, I'd say, quirks. A lot of the guys that are tackles, they actually are projecting to be maybe more guards at the NFL level. And there's actually a couple guards from college that actually have some tackle potential in the NFL. Obviously, both positions are important, but there is often a higher need for tackles. Can you explain a little bit as to who these guys in the group are, what we should expect from them, and who really are the key pieces you want?
You know, you mentioned the word quirky. That might be the most perfect word for all of this, Ben, because let's just start with the offensive tackles. I mentioned the top 2 guys in this draft. You have LSU offensive tackle Will Campbell, and then you have Missouri offensive tackle Armand Membu. And really, when you look at both these guys, we'll talk about each of them individually here in a second. But when you're looking for an offensive tackle, you're looking for a left tackle. That's the premium position. Will Campbell, there is the arm length issue, which for some people is an issue, for some people is not. For Membu, he never played left tackle. He was primarily a right tackle. So are you willing to take him and just leave him a right tackle? That's possible. Or are you willing to try to flip him? And we've seen teams do that. And in some cases it works. In some cases it doesn't. It's not that simple to flip from the right side to the left side. It's as if you're writing with your right hand and trying to flip with your left hand. It's not that easy. So those are the 2 questions when it comes to these guys. And if you're actually drafting them to be your left tackles. Now let's start with Will Campbell. And again, the arm length is either right or right below the threshold for what the teams want in the NFL. He did measure in at 33 inches at his pro day. He was a little bit less than that at the combine. So teams wanted to be at least 33. It did come in at 33 at the pro day, but 3-year starter at LSU, all of it at left tackle, has extremely high football IQ, really great awareness of what's happening. He will call out blitzes there from the left tackle side. He was a captain each of the last 2 years. And one of the things that I didn't notice, and I learned about this recently, I probably should have known this, but to just give context of how important he was at LSU, he was given the number 7 jersey, which in LSU is given out every single year to the most electric playmaker on that team. Campbell had it each of the last 2 years. Now, an offensive lineman cannot wear number 7, so he wore a patch on the corner of his jersey. But just to give context of how important he was to that program, he was given that patch there at LSU as the most electric playmaker, an offensive lineman having that. So some things you just don't overthink. He was a tremendous left tackle there at LSU. All 3 years, got better and better, pass protector in running. And again, his IQ is really what makes him different. Like usually you have the center calling out protections and calling out blitzes. He would do it at LSU from the left tackle side. So a really, really special player. If the arm length does not bother you, you're taking him, and he wants to be a left tackle. He has made that clear throughout this process. He has made that clear. His agent, Eric Burkhead, has made that clear to all the teams as well. That's where he wants to play. If you want him at guard, don't take him because he wants to play at left tackle. Now, Armand Membu from Missouri, like I said before, he primarily played right tackle. So the question really becomes, could he play left tackle if you draft him there? He does not have any experience playing at that position collegiately. Now, tremendous body control, great movement, great lower half especially, and he has a very unique build because he is 6'4". I think most teams will want their left tackles to be 6'5" or 6'6", somewhere in that range. But he does have the long arms, which again was the question with Will Campbell. But great tape this past year. Still super young, just turned 21 a couple of weeks ago, and was very durable throughout his career there at Missouri. But again, the question with him, are you drafting him to be primarily a right tackle? If you want that, he could do it, no problem. If you want him on the left side, there are some questions there with him. Let's move over to the interior of the offensive line, and we're going to start at Alabama with their guard, Tyler Booker. I mean, this is the best guard in this year's draft on most teams that I've heard from, for most scouts, but he primarily played left guard. He's immediate plug and play, draft him, play him right away, but he is somebody that he's not versatile. You cannot play him at tackle. You cannot play him at center. He is just a guard, but heavy hands, great pass protector, very strong and powerful, a mauler. He's always looking. If he has nothing to do, he's finding someone to bring down. So he was a captain. He was a leader. He holds people accountable. And again, the only downside over here is that you're drafting him to be a guard and only a guard. That's really where it comes in to the next player on this list, and that is North Dakota interior offensive lineman Gray Zabel. Now, this has been one of the biggest risers in this year's draft. I probably should have mentioned him yesterday on the show, but he played 4 offensive line positions at North Dakota State. Scouts see him also potentially playing center in the NFL once he gets there in a couple of weeks, but his versatility, unlike Booker, is really what makes him valuable in this year's draft. He could, play at either guard spots. If you need him at tackle, he could play left or right tackle as well. And teams really do value that. And he's really crushed it throughout this pre-draft process, crushed it at the Senior Bowl, crushed it at the Combine, has crushed all his meetings with teams, whether that was privately or at the Senior Bowl, or at the Combine, wherever it was with teams. He has given off a really good impression, great footwork, a captain, also very durable. And again, just like Booker, immediate plug and play. But if you're looking for somebody more versatile, that is where a guy like Gray Zabel comes in.
Cool. All right. Let's go ahead and switch over to the other side of the ball. I don't need as many guys. We're going to cover more of the defenders as we get going through the next couple of weeks. But can you give me one guy at each level of the defense? Edge, interior defensive line, linebacker, and in the secondary?
Yeah, we'll get let's start with the edge. You're right. We'll go with Abdul Carter is the number 1 guy in this draft. Everyone knows that. But who's after that? And that's really where it gets interesting. And I think most people, not everybody, will tell you Georgia edge Jalen Walker. And he is a very intriguing prospect in this draft because he at Georgia played both as an off-ball linebacker and as an edge defender. And he can win with his speed and his power. And he's somebody who literally plays as if the world's about to end. But the thing about him is that he's not ideal for every team. The reason I say that is the fit truly matters with him with where he ends up, because some teams just won't know how to use him. He really was used all over the place there with the Georgia Bulldogs, which they've done with other players in the past as well. But he really needs to be with a defensive coordinator who can be creative. This might be a little bit of a rich comp for him, but there's some Micah Parsons to him where at Penn State, Micah Parsons also was in off-ball situations during his time over there. And eventually, once he came to the NFL, it's like, no, this guy is best. His calling card is getting to the quarterback. So I think he could go as early as number 5 to Jacksonville. I think number 8 to Carolina is in play. I think number 9 to New Orleans is in play. But this is somebody who was able to do both at Georgia. But I do think his calling card is coming off the edge, and he could do that again with speed and with power. When you go to the interior of the defensive line, you mentioned it before, Ben, Mason Graham from Michigan is obviously the top guy in this draft. But from there, you look at a guy like Oregon defensive tackle Derek Harmon. Now, let me preface this by saying the interior defensive line of this draft, it is stacked and loaded, and people have these guys all over the board after Mason. But when you look at a guy like Derek Harmon, he transferred to Oregon this past year from Michigan State. And at Michigan State, he was more of a run stuffer. And then he came over to Oregon, and his entire game started to blossom. And that's really where he moved up from being maybe the 6th or 7th interior defensive lineman in this draft to being in that conversation at 2, 3, or 4. And he showed that he could really make an impact in the game in so many ways. He has the size to hold up inside. He has the power to control blockers. If you really want him to go to the edge, he has the burst to shoot those gaps, and he has a really, really good first step. He led all FBS defenders this past year with over 50 pressures. I think the number was 55 pressures this past year, and he really moves well for his frame, and he really holds his own on any down. There are some questions at what was his playing weight at Michigan State versus what it was at Oregon. It looks like he trimmed down a little bit at Oregon, which made all this possible. Is that going to be his playing weight in the NFL? But this is somebody who I think at the start of the year, when he initially transferred to Oregon, was nowhere near to this conversation. And the way he had his game develop this past year, especially becoming more than just a run stuffer, he is somebody who I do believe has moved up over here, up the boards. He's just a complete 3-tech defensive tackle in this year's draft. I think he has an argument to be defensive tackle number 2 after Mason Graham, again, in a very, very loaded interior defensive lineman draft. Let's go over to the linebackers, and compared to the interior defensive line, linebacker is not loaded this year. I think there's maybe only one linebacker, true linebacker, who is going to be a first-round pick, and that is Alabama linebacker Jihad Campbell, the number 1 linebacker in the draft. For most teams, I would say maybe all teams, he was actually recruited by Alabama initially to be an edge rusher, but he ended up moving over to becoming a linebacker because of just how deep the pass rush unit was at Alabama. If you keep in mind, they had, Will Anderson there. They had Dallas Turner there, who was drafted last year, but long and rangy and somebody who could really be a sideline to sideline linebacker in the NFL, somebody who flies around the field and really has the potential to play as an every down off-ball linebacker in the NFL. His range, I think in a different draft when there were more linebackers who are top talents, he might not be a first-round pick, but just because there are not many linebackers in this draft with top-end talent, I think he is somebody who does end up going in the first round of this year's draft. And then let's wrap it up over here with one secondary player. I mentioned yesterday a secondary player with the Kentucky cornerback Maxwell Hairston. I got some pushback on that on Twitter yesterday when I said he could be cornerback number 2. Most people in the media and most people fans believe that guy is Michigan cornerback Will Johnson. Now, I'm going to try to say exactly why I think there is some competition for him for cornerback number 2. Travis Hunter is number 1. But the reason for that is that he battled injuries in 2024, and he simply did not have the year he wanted to this past year. Again, really good size, 6'1", 194 pounds, 30 and 1/8 inch arms, and really has the build for the prototypical type of cornerback in the 2025 NFL. The problem was this past year There were some moments, like you watch 2023, he basically was outstanding, amazing. 2024, the injuries, he got beat at times, did not finish the year. There's some question marks there. And the thing about it, and this is probably the best comp coming off the top of my head right now, it's a little bit Derek Stingley-ish, where Derek Stingley at LSU in his freshman year wins the national championship, was one of the best corners in the nation. And after that, kind of fell off a little bit, was not the same player the way he was in his freshman year, but he was still drafted number 3 overall, just became the highest paid cornerback in the NFL. Will Johnson, 2023, win national championship, was one of the best cornerbacks of the nation. This past year was just not the same on film. So are you going to say, just throw this past year away, we're focusing on 2023? Or are you looking at 2024 and saying, no, something does not look exactly the way it was in 2023? If you go based off 2023, he is cornerback 2 in this draft after Travis Hunter. But I do believe some teams are kind of hitting him off over here because of what he saw in 2024. But those are some of the other defensive here that we should be ready to hear early and often here in the 2025 NFL draft in under 2 weeks.
We get everybody here, Ari. Anyone else that we missed on the offense? Any quarterbacks you want to give a little shout out to real quick?
Well, we're going to talk more about quarterbacks here next week. And the reason I don't want to mention any is because it's truly impossible to figure this out right now. Like, we know Cam Ward's going number 1. Shedeur Sanders could go, would not surprise me 2, would not surprise me 3, would not surprise me 9, would not surprise me 21, would not surprise me someone trading back in from round 2, would not surprise me not even in the first round. It's absolutely insane. I don't remember the last quarterback like this. And then obviously the other quarterbacks, like, they're going to get that buzz of Jackson Dart, and they'll get this buzz about Jalen Milroe and Tyler Shuck and all these different people. And it's like, we're going to talk about it with a guest here next week on Tuesday. The quarterback class, which one is it? We said it earlier this week. Is this the 2021 quarterback class, or is this the 2024 quarterback class? For people who don't remember, 2021 was Kenny Pickett, Malik Willis, Sam Howell, Desmond Ridder, and all those guys were getting first-round buzz, and only one went in the first round. 2024, we had the great quarterbacks with Jaden and Caleb and Drake, and there were some questions about, will Penix go in round 1 and will Bo Nix go in round 1, and they all did. So which quarterback class do we have this year? We'll talk about it more next week on the show with a very special guest.
Yeah, our guest is one of the leading draft experts, and I'm pretty excited because, like you were saying, it seems like we were starting to hear some of that Jackson Dart hype. This guy does not have Jackson Dart as his 3rd quarterback, which is going to be fun asking him as to why that is the case. So make sure that you are subscribed so that you get that notification when that guest is going to be on the show with us. You'll obviously announce it on your X page, and it'll be fun. You should make sure you tune in on Tuesday.
We're in full draft mode, Ben. A lot of draft coverage here. We're talking about all the names you know, some of the names you might not know. We're going to keep on doing more draft coverage here as we get closer and closer, whether that's having guests, having prospects on the show, and of course, just talking in general what the NFL thinks, what people in league circles think. And of course, it's lying season out there. Some people are trying to throw you off a little bit, but we're going to try to get you all the facts and what is real and what actually matters here. So that wraps up the week. We will be back here on Monday morning talking more NFL draft, and we will see you all here on Monday morning. Enjoy the weekend.